So think about this scenario for a second. Imagine a billionaire landlord leaves town for a long business trip, right?
Okay, I'm with you.
And his tenants decide the absolute best way to get out of paying rent is to, well, beat his employees half to death. And then they murder his only son.
That is incredibly dark.
It is. It sounds like a modern true crime thriller,
Yeah.
something involving a hostile corporate takeover, maybe some staggering amount of bloodshed.
Yeah, it definitely reads like a cartel story.
But that scenario is actually a 2,000-year-old political trap.
Spot on.
And welcome to reform thinking, by the way. Today, we are taking a deep dive into the final days of Jesus' earthly ministry, specifically looking at a massive confrontation mapped out in two parables from the Gospel of Luke.
Chapters 19 and 20.
Right. And, when people read these ancient historical accounts, there is this terrible habit of stripping away the blood, the dirt, and the intense political danger.
Oh, it happens constantly.
We want to read these texts like simple little fables. We look for clean moral lines, the good guys on one side, the bad guys on the other.
Right, we want a comforting little lesson to apply to our morning routines.
Yes. But if you have ever read these parables and walked away thinking they were just nice allegories about being a productive employee or having good manners, you are missing the underlying political coup.
People want Aesop's fables. They look for something easily digestible. But the moment you step into the historical and theological realities of first-century Judea, that comforting, clean fable shatters into a million pieces.
It really does.
You find yourself standing in a landscape that is incredibly volatile. It is rigged with political landmines, and it is highly dangerous for anyone caught in the crossfire.
The mission of this deep dive is to correct that modern oversight. For you, the listener, we're going to look at source material that is highly charged.
The stakes here are as high as they get.
These are bold declarations about a rejected king, a delayed coronation, and a radical, terrifying grace.
And these texts are so often divorced from their immediate environment. Modern readers try to extract generic morality or even tips on personal ambition.
Oh yeah, like investment strategies.
Right. But the source material is giving us a front row seat to a regime change. And to grasp what happens at the climax, we cannot start at the end of the story.
We really can't. The danger inside the capital city is just the explosion. The fuse is actually lit miles away.
Yes, down in the valley.
So, to understand the climax that happens inside the walls of Jerusalem, we first have to stand on the dusty road approaching the city from the east.
Down in Jericho.
Right in the Jordan Valley.
Yeah.
Political expectations are sitting at an absolute fever pitch there.
Jericho is an incredible starting line for this sequence. You cannot think of it as just a random spot on a map.
Because it had a massive Herodian presence, right?
Absolutely. This was a lush oasis city, and it was heavily associated with the Herodian administration. Herod the Great had built a massive winter palace there.
So it was a center of wealth.
A huge hub of extreme wealth, royal estates, and naturally, a major center for taxation.
Which makes people very angry.
Very angry. And geographically, when you leave Jericho and head for Jerusalem, you are facing a grueling, steep ascent through an arid wilderness.
It's an uphill climb, physically.
You physically climb up a mountain road toward the capital, but that physical climb mirrors a massive symbolic ascent. You are moving from a city defined by Herodian wealth and Roman collaboration straight up into the sacred administrative center of Israel.
And the atmosphere on that road is not peaceful at all.
Not even a little bit.
You have this massive crowd, and the literary context right before this ascent provides the trigger for everything that follows.
We're talking about Zacchaeus here.
Yes, we know the story of Zacchaeus.
Yeah.
He is not just a wealthy guy. He is a chief tax collector.
Which means he is hated.
Oh, absolutely disguised.
Huh.
For the people in that crowd, he's the ultimate collaborator with the occupying forces. He is funding the Roman boot on their necks.
Yeah, he's a traitor.
But then, moments before they start this climb, Jesus calls Zacchaeus down from a tree, goes to his house, and sovereignly saves him.
Right in front of everyone.
Jesus publicly declares that salvation has come to this despised collaborator. The crowd sees this radical display of grace, and their minds start racing.
The timing is combustible, honestly. You have this massive display of sovereign authority over the worst kind of political traitor, and it is happening right as the Passover season approaches.
Which means hundreds of thousands of pilgrims are flooding the roads.
Yes, and Passover is not just a religious holiday, It is the annual celebration of national liberation.
Like an Independence Day.
Essentially, yes. The people are remembering how God freed them from slavery in Egypt, They have a long memory of historical oppression, and they have this boiling, intense hope for liberation from Rome.
So you mix all that together?
And it's a powder keg. When you combine the physical nearness to the holy city, the approaching feast of liberation, and the sudden authoritative salvation of a chief tax collector, the crowd's expectations just overflow.
They do the math and come up with a very specific, explosive answer. They assume the kingdom of God is going to appear instantly.
Wait, they want it now.
They are looking at Jesus and thinking, this is it. We are marching up this hill. We are going to crush the Roman occupation, and we are restoring the throne of David by dinner time.
That is the anticipation. They want a political messiah to execute an immediate, violent, visible triumph.
It makes me think of a populist political campaign rolling into a capital city right before a highly contested, volatile election.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
You have this massive crowd, the energy is electric, the banners are flying, and nobody in that crowd is interested in a gradual shift in public policy.
No, they want a revolution.
They want the current administration thrown out of the building today and their candidate installed by force if necessary. They're demanding immediate regime change.
The air is thick with the anticipation of a coup. And Jesus knows this. He reads the crowd's false timetable perfectly.
And he addresses it immediately.
What is striking is that he does not wait until they reach the city to address it. Right there, on the road, with all that momentum pushing forward, he tells the parable of the 10 minas.
Okay, let's unpack that.
His goal is to correct their false timetable without denying the reality of the kingdom itself. He is telling them, in no uncertain terms, that the king must go away, receive the kingdom in a distant place, and return much later.
The kingdom is absolutely certain, but it is not immediate in the way they are demanding.
Precisely.
The setup of this parable is so fascinating to me. A nobleman goes to a distant country to receive a kingdom for himself. Before he leaves, he calls 10 of his servants and gives them 10 minas, 1 mina each.
Right.
He tells them to engage in business until he comes back.
Right.
But meanwhile, his own citizens hate him. They send a delegation after him, essentially an embassy, saying, we do not want this man to reign over us.
Yeah.
Now, to a modern ear, this sounds like a generic fairy tale opening. But Jesus is pulling this narrative straight from the local headlines, isn't he?
He absolutely is. We have to view this through a Middle Eastern historical lens. This was not a hypothetical story at all.
Right.
The people standing on that road would instantly recognize the specific historical event Jesus is referencing. This was recent, bloody history for them, involving the Herodian dynasty.
Wait, what is the specific historical event? Did this actually happen?
Yes. When Herod the Great died around 4 BC, he left his kingdom to his son Archelaus.
Okay.
But in the Roman Empire, a client king could not just assume the throne because his father wrote it in a will. Archelaus had to travel across the Mediterranean to Rome to seek imperial confirmation from Caesar Augustus.
Ah, so he is the nobleman going to a distant country to receive a kingdom.
Spot on. And at the exact same time Archelaus sailed for Rome, his political opponents in Judea sent an embassy of 50 men to Rome to protest his claim.
You were kidding.
No, they stood before Caesar and literally argued that they did not want Archelaus to rule over them.
That is wild. So the entire crowd listening to Jesus knows exactly how this political game is played. They know a contested kingship is a deadly serious affair.
They know it intimately. Augustus ended up giving Archelaus a lesser title, ethnarch, instead of king. But when Archelaus returned to Judea, he brutally punished the opponents who tried to block his ascension.
Wow.
So when Jesus tells a story about a nobleman going away to receive a kingdom, an embassy protesting him, and the nobleman returning to settle accounts, the crowd feels the historical gravity. They know blood will be spilled when the king returns.
This changes the entire complexion of the story.
It really does.
If this narrative is rooted in the bloody, contested politics of ancient Judea, it completely wrecks the way this parable is usually taught today.
Oh, 100%.
I hear this passage used all the time in seminars about maximizing your talents, being productive at work, or making smart financial investments.
It's treated like a mutual fund strategy.
Right. But a mina is only about 3 months' wages. If this guy is a king, why test his servants with such a tiny amount of money? And that seems incredibly petty if this is just a test of their financial genius.
It is not a test of their financial genius. That's the key. In a first-century honor-shame culture, the core issue is public loyalty.
Public loyalty. Okay, explain that.
Look at the environment. The citizens hate this nobleman. They're actively trying to strip him of his crown in Rome. If you are one of his servants and you take his money into the local marketplace to trade and do business, what are you actually doing?
Well, you are putting his name into public circulation.
Yes,
Yeah.
you are openly declaring, I belong to the absent king and I am operating under his authority. You are doing this while his political enemies are watching your every move.
Wait, if the whole city sent an embassy to Rome to stop this guy from becoming king, taking his money into the market isn't an investment strategy. It's putting a massive target on your back.
Absolutely.
Doing business in that environment requires immense courage. You are risking your life to trade with that mina.
You are.
If the embassy succeeds in Rome and the nobleman loses his claim to the throne, those citizens are going to execute the servants who supported him.
You see the danger perfectly. Doing business is a highly visible declaration of allegiance to a contested king. In a hostile environment, remaining inactive is the only way to stay safe.
Wow.
Doing business means aligning yourself with the king before his coronation is finalized. It requires massive faith that the king will actually return with authority.
That reality makes the accounting at the end of the parable so striking.
It really amplifies it.
The nobleman returns. He actually receives the kingdom, despite the protest from the embassy. He summons the servants. The faithful ones, the ones who went into the host market and multiplied the minas, are rewarded with massive authority.
They get whole cities.
Right, they are given rule over entire cities. But notice the specific language the first servant uses. He doesn't say, look at my incredible business skills. He says, Lord, your mina has made 10 minas more.
That phrasing is critical for understanding the theology of the text. The credit remains entirely on the king's initial gift.
It's all about what the king provided.
Yes. The servant acknowledges that the fruitfulness belongs to the one who provided the trust in the first place. The grace precedes the responsibility. The king gives the mina before the work is required, but the accountability upon his return is absolute.
But then we get to the third servant, the unfaithful one. He comes forward and says he hid the mina. And he didn't even bury it in the ground for safekeeping, which was the standard practice for hiding valuables in the ancient world.
No, he just wrapped it in a piece of cloth.
Yeah, a fragile domestic handkerchief used for wiping sweat. He justifies his total inactivity by claiming he was afraid. He says to the master, you are a severe man. You take what you did not deposit and reap what you did not sow.
Here we see a textbook case of theological slander. The servant is openly accusing the master of injustice. He views the master's authority as a form of theft.
It reminds me of an employee who engages in quiet quitting.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
They check out. They do the absolute bare minimum because they have constructed this completely toxic, false narrative in their head about their manager's character.
Right, the boss is always out to get him.
They convince themselves the boss is cruel or that the company is stealing their labor.
Yep.
They use that slander to justify their own laziness and rebellion.
And the master immediately dismantles the servant's excuse using the servant's own logic. He says, essentially, if you truly believed I was a harsh, strict man who demands financial gain from nothing, you would have at least put the money in a bank to earn interest.
The master exposes the lie.
Completely.
The excuse completely falls apart. If he was really terrified of a strict master, he would have done something safe to earn a return.
The inactivity was not born out of a cautious, reverent fear of a holy master. It was culpable unbelief. It was practical disloyalty.
Because he was scared of the citizens.
Exactly. Spot on. The servant wanted to preserve his own safety among the hostile citizens. He didn't want to risk his social standing by publicly identifying with the master's resources.
So the underlying theological principle here is that false views of God produce fearful, fruitless disobedience.
Yes.
When human beings construct a false narrative about God viewing him as cruel or demanding or unjust, they use that false theology to justify their own refusal to submit to his authority. The servant buried the trust because his heart was alienated from the character of the king.
And the consequences are severe. The mina is taken from him. But the parable doesn't end with the servants.
Right, they're the citizens.
The citizens who sent the embassy, the ones who actively rejected the king, are brought forward and judged with absolute finality. The king orders them to be executed in his presence. It is a harsh, shocking ending to the story.
It's brutal.
It is severe because willful rebellion against rightful divine rule carries absolute consequences. The Jesus who offers radical grace is also the appointed judge of the universe.
The danger on the road was just a preview then. The real explosion happens when Jesus actually arrives at the seat of power.
That's when things really escalate.
This judgment pronounced outside the city perfectly foreshadows the violent confrontation awaiting Jesus inside the city walls. That brings us to our second block of source material, found in Luke chapter 20.
The scene shifts.
Yes, Jesus has arrived in Jerusalem, and he doesn't go to the local Roman political offices. He bypasses the fortresses. He goes straight to the temple.
What he executes there is a massive disruptive event. You have to visualize the scale of this. The temple complex was roughly 35 acres.
35 acres. That is huge.
It was a sprawling hub of logistics, economics, and religious administration. You had money changers, animal vendors, priests coordinating a massive influx of sacrifices for Passover. It was an enormous, well-oiled machine.
And Jesus shuts it down.
He does.
He overturns the tables. He physically blockades the logistics of the sacrificial system. He starts acting like a property owner, evaluating his own estate.
This was a direct, cosmic challenge against the illegitimate high priestly establishment. The house of Annas and Caiaphas controlled that 35-acre space. Naturally, the authorities react immediately.
They can't just let that happen.
Right. The Sanhedrin, which is comprised of the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders, marches up to him. This is the supreme religious and legal court of Israel. They surround him and demand to know the legal source of his authority. Who gave you this authority to do these things?
Jesus refuses to play their game, though. He doesn't give them a standard academic or scribal defense. He doesn't cite previous rabbis or legal precedents to justify his actions.
No, he flips it on them.
Instead, he traps them with a question about John the Baptist's authority. When they refuse to answer because it will implicate them either way, Jesus turns away from them. He faces the crowd, with the Sanhedrin standing right there listening, and he tells the parable of the vineyard.
It is a highly autobiographical response.
So how does the Sanhedrin interpret this parable?
To grasp the weight of this, we have to look at the intertextual echo. Every single Jewish listener in that temple courtyard, especially the scholars in the Sanhedrin, would have recognized the opening lines. Jesus is deliberately rewriting Isaiah chapter 5, known as the Song of the Vineyard. Okay. In Isaiah's version, God plants a vineyard, does all the work to make it perfect, clears the stones, builds a watchtower, sets up a wine vat, but when the harvest comes, the vineyard produces bitter, wild grapes.
Right.
And the result in Isaiah is that God destroys the vineyard itself. He tears down the walls, removes the hedge, and lets it go to ruin. The vineyard in Isaiah represents the entire nation of Israel.
But Jesus changes the script, and this is a crucial theological pivot. In Jesus' parable, the vineyard is fine. It is perfectly capable of producing fruit. So the nation isn't the problem in this story.
No, God is not abandoning his promises. God is not destroying the heritage of Israel. The problem is strictly with the corrupt renters, the vine dressers. God is separating the corrupt administration from the covenant people. He is stripping the Sanhedrin of their stewardship.
Let's look at the setup of the story Jesus tells. A man plants a vineyard, leases it to tenants, and goes away for a long time. When the season for fruit arrives, he sends a servant to collect his share of the crop. But the tenants beat the servant and send him away empty-handed. So the owner sends a second servant. They beat him, treat him shamefully, and send him away. He sends a third. They wound this one and throw him out.
It's a pattern of escalating violence.
I have to stop and ask a logical question here, though. Why on earth do these tenant farmers think they can just beat up the owner's representatives and get away with it?
That's the million-dollar question.
The owner is clearly wealthy enough to plant a massive estate and hire multiple servants. He could easily send an armed militia to clear out these rebellious farmers.
Yeah.
What is the tenants' actual end game here? Are they just violently lashing out?
They are not acting out of random, mindless violence. They are executing a highly calculated legal maneuver.
Really?
Yes. In the ancient Middle East, there were significant tensions between absentee landlords and local peasant workers. But more specifically, there were property laws regarding squatters' rights that these tenants are trying to manipulate.
Squatters' rights. Like someone today moving into an abandoned house and eventually claiming legal ownership.
Very similar, actually. According to the Mishnah, specifically a tractate called Bava Batra 3.1, there was a legal principle known as usicaption.
Usicaption.
Yes. The law existed originally to ensure agricultural land did not sit barren and useless if an owner disappeared. It dictated that if an occupant cultivated a piece of property for 3 consecutive years and the owner failed to successfully claim his share of the produce during that time, The occupant could petition to claim legal title to the land.
Oh, wow. So they are physically running out the clock.
That's what they're doing.
That explains why they beat the servants and send them away empty-handed instead of just killing them immediately. If they kill the servants right away, the owner sends an army.
Right.
But if they just beat them up and physically block them from taking any fruit off the property, they keep the owner from asserting his legal rights for that harvest season. They're deliberately trying to trigger the 3-year legal loophole.
That is the precise legal mechanism they are exploiting. They are trying to sever the owner's legal connection to the vineyard through sustained physical resistance. They want to steal the property using the letter of the law.
That makes the next part of the story absolutely chilling. After 3 servants fail, the owner decides to send his beloved son. When the tenants see the son arriving, they look at each other and say, "This is the heir. Let us kill him, that the inheritance may be ours."
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
When you first read that, it sounds like sheer madness.
Yeah.
How does murdering the owner's son get them the title to the property?
It reveals the cold, murderous logic of the ancient property laws. In the ancient Near East, if an absentee owner died without a local living heir to claim the estate, the property was legally classified as abandoned.
Abandoned property.
The first occupants to physically claim the land could take permanent, undisputed title.
So when the tenants look out from the watchtower and see the son arriving completely alone, without a military escort, they make a lethal assumption.
They assume the absent father has died, and this son has traveled to the vineyard as the sole remaining heir to finally claim the estate and settle the dispute.
And if they eliminate the heir?
If they eliminate the heir, the legal chain of ownership is broken forever. The property becomes legally abandoned. Killing the son is their final, calculated maneuver to steal the inheritance under the guise of legal abandonment.
Wow, Jesus is using this agrarian law to hold a mirror up to the Sanhedrin.
He is. This perfectly mirrors their delusion. They believe that by executing Jesus, they can permanently secure their autonomous control over the temple, the sacrificial system, and the nation of Israel.
They genuinely think they can kill the Son of God and keep the religion for themselves. That is a terrifying level of self-deception. It shows how blinding the pursuit of authority can be.
It's pure hubris.
Before we look at the murder, though, we need to examine the owner's response before he sends the son, because the structure of this parable is an absolute masterpiece.
It uses an ancient Semitic rhetorical device called ring composition or asymmetrical chiasm.
How does that work?
Well, in modern Western storytelling, we are trained to build to a climax at the very end of the narrative. The big reveal happens on the final page, but in ancient Middle Eastern literature, the climax is often placed right in the dead center of the text, creating a mirror effect on either side. Everything builds to the middle and then resolves outward.
So what sits at the center of this parable?
The center is not the final judgment of the tenants. The center is the agonizing soliloquy of the owner. After the third servant is beaten and thrown out, the text pauses. The owner asks himself, "What shall I do? I will send my beloved son. Perhaps they will respect him."
It is an incredible moment of divine vulnerability.
It introduces a Greek concept called macrothemia. It corresponds to the Arabic word halim. When you look at how this word functions, it describes a person who possesses absolute, unchecked sovereign might. They have every legal right, every moral justification, and the physical ability to exact immediate, crushing vengeance on their enemies.
But they don't.
Right. They actively choose to put their righteous anger far away. They choose a path of extreme vulnerability in pursuit of reconciliation.
That makes me think of the story of David and King Saul in 1 Samuel chapter 26.
Oh, perfect parallel.
Saul has been hunting David down like an animal for years. David creeps into Saul's camp at night and finds Saul completely vulnerable, fast asleep on the ground. David has Saul's own spear in his hand. He has the authority, the moral justification, and the physical ability to end his mortal enemy right then and there.
He could have ended it.
But he chooses to spare him. He chooses grace over immediate execution. But what the vineyard owner does is even more shocking.
It really is.
Instead of sending a heavily armed militia to wipe out the tenants who have just brutalized his servants, he sends his only child. He sends his beloved son, completely unarmed, into a den of violent thieves. He offers them the highest possible diplomatic gesture of peace.
It is a staggering narrative depiction of divine grace and the incarnation, God sending his son into a hostile world. And it brings us face to face with the grim reality of human nature, specifically the doctrine of total depravity.
Yeah, look at their reaction.
Notice how the tenants react to this incredible display of macrothemia. They do not have a single shred of cooperative goodwill. The owner extends the ultimate vulnerability, the highest possible offer of amnesty, by sending his own son, and their immediate natural reaction is homicide.
It exposes what we could call the squatter's heart. The squatter wants all the abundant benefits of the Creator, the fertile soil, the sunshine, the rain, the grapes, but they actively seek to eliminate the absolute authority of the Creator over their lives. They want the gifts without the giver. They want the vineyard without the landlord.
And this leads directly to the prophetic execution within the story. Jesus adds a very specific geographical detail to the murder. The tenants do not just kill the son, they cast him out of the vineyard and kill him.
They throw him outside the walls of the estate.
Yes. This is a direct, literal prophecy of what is about to happen to Jesus. He will not be executed inside the temple courts. He will be dragged outside the city walls of Jerusalem to a hill called Golgotha, where he will be crucified. He is cast out of the administrative center by the corrupt leaders. He dies outside the camp.
And when Jesus reaches the end of the parable, he drops the hammer. He says, the owner will come, destroy those tenants, and give the vineyard to others. The reaction from the crowd and the Sanhedrin is visceral. They scream, God forbid.
They are horrified.
The Greek phrase Luke uses is melinoito. It is a gasp of absolute horror.
They gasp because they finally understand the historical and theological implications of the story. Jesus is announcing the complete dismantling of the high priestly aristocracy. He is declaring that their exclusive monopoly over God's covenant people is coming to a sovereign, violent end. They realize he is talking about them.
Luke records that when they scream, God forbid, Jesus looks at them. But it is not a casual glance. The Greek verb is emblepsis. He locks eyes with them using a piercing well, a steady, penetrating gaze. He is looking at them with the full judicial weight of the universe. And then he quotes Psalm 118. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone.
The brilliance of this moment is found in the underlying linguistic wordplay. Jesus and his audience are speaking Aramaic, and they have a thorough knowledge of biblical Hebrew. In Hebrew, the word for son is ben. The word for stone is eben.
Ben and Eben, they sound almost identical.
Jesus is phonetically linking the story of the vineyard to the ancient psalm. He is declaring, the Ben, the son that you just murdered and cast out of the vineyard, is the very same Eben the stone that God will sovereignly establish as the chief cornerstone of his new temple.
Oh, that is amazing.
The builders, the Sanhedrin, reject the material, but God overrules their rejection and makes it the core structure of everything.
That sets up a terrifying dual reality at the end of the text. Jesus says, everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, but when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. There is an inescapable law-gospel dynamic here.
It reveals that there is absolutely no neutral ground when it comes to the claims of Christ. You cannot just admire the stone from a distance. The stone represents the absolute lordship of Jesus. You have two choices.
What are they?
You can fall upon that stone in brokenness. That represents repentance. It means having your self-righteousness shattered, abandoning your illusion of autonomy, and throwing yourself entirely on his mercy. When you do that, the stone becomes your steady, unshakable foundation.
But the alternative is to stand your ground, to maintain your squatter's rights, to reject his authority and claim the vineyard for yourself.
If you do that, you position yourself under the stone. And when the stone falls in final judgment, it will crush that rebellion entirely. He is either the foundation you build your life upon through faith, or he is the sovereign judge that shatters your defiance.
This brings the two parables together so clearly. We are living right now in the interval described in the first parable. The king, the beloved son, had been rejected by the builders, crucified outside the vineyard, and resurrected. He has gone to the far country to receive his kingdom, and he has promised to return.
And in the meantime, during this historical interval, we are entrusted with his resources, his minas, the gospel, the truth, our time, our families, our local churches. We are holding these trusts in a world that mimics the wicked tenants.
Right.
We live among citizens who are constantly sending embassies saying, we do not want this man to rule over us.
The temptation for us is to act like hostile squatters, hoarding the resources for ourselves, or to act like the fearful servant, hiding our allegiance in a handkerchief because we are intimidated by the hostile culture around us. We don't want to risk our social standing by taking the king's coin into the public square.
That's the real danger for the modern church.
Which leaves us with a final thought to mull over, something for you, the listener, to carry with you after this deep dive. If we truly believe the king's return is certain and that his inheritance is completely secure, because the Father has already decreed that the rejected stone is the cornerstone, how does that reality free us?
It should free us completely.
How does it free us from the frantic, anxiety-driven need to build our own little empires here? What would it look like tomorrow morning to stop living like a squatter desperately defending a temporary plot of land and start living visibly, courageously, as a confident steward of a king who already holds the title to the entire earth?